I'd like to introduce our first presenter, Dr. Daniel Foster and Dr. Rebecca Crawford-Foster, who will share with us and do a presentation on ancestral and Indigenous healing from an Indigenous American perspective. Dr. Daniel Foster and Dr. Rebecca Crawford-Foster, over to you.
Our camera's stopped by the host, so we're not able to turn on the video. Can you hear me? Can you hear us?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, could someone turn on our camera? Unblock our video?
I just asked to start video. I don't know if it's allowing you.
There you are.
Thank you.
There you are.
Amatakapi Dan Foster, Imachipelo. Nahayu Chante Washtea Napichuakielo. I greeted you with an American name, but early on we give our children often we seek them where they're even born. We go to elders and seek the name of the one that's coming, and the similarities already of our relatives that have shared ahead of us in our own way, which is Wolokota, and has been here thousands and thousands of years. We, of course, from here, but it seems that whoever owns the presses owns the history. And so we came here from a variety of routes, just as all of you listening came here from a variety of routes. I enjoyed what we said even about the water, because we reflect earth, air, fire, and water, and we find this in answers throughout the world. You folks know that. Beck and I both are the first generation from our families to get degrees, and I'm going to allow her to introduce herself, and then we're going to sing an eagle, and we'll explain why.
Hi, I'm Rebecca Crawford-Foster, and I'm Scott Bikani. I'm Blackfeet in Dakota, Montana, and I have the love of being a mother and a grandmother and a wife, and also a therapist. So I spent my life caring for our people that I can to help with all the problems and stuff that we're facing.
The song that we're going to sing is we use music not to entertain, though I do find it entertaining. And just like drumming, we say the drumming is the heartbeat of our mother, grandmother Earth. The heartbeat is what we hear when we're still in the womb. The drums bring us back and take us. And I found out when I heard about the me versus we. I don't know if you know that Becky's a related band to the Amskapi Bokoni, which were just across the border of Canada, which of course didn't exist until colonization came. But they introduced Maslow to actualization. But what Maslow had to change it, and he did change it because he couldn't have shared it from Harvard or anywhere in America, because it wasn't self-actualization. It was our actualization. It was actualization as a community, not as an individual. And it was changed. Everything in this world, in this dominant society, seems to be reduced, objectified, monetized, so far from the concept of water as living. I think our relative that shared and blessed the water and blessed through the water. As he said, we're 70% water, and so is the covering of the earth, 70% water. The earth within us returns to earth. All we are is breathing, living earth. And we don't think of ourselves as on fire, but that metabolism is necessary. We call it temperature, but you are on fire indeed. And a chemical fire, but you lose that fire and you will return to the temperature of the earth. And so our journey has been a most meaningful one. When we were young and we went to education, our family encouraged education, but truly did not understand what it meant other than we were going to be gone for a long time. I did not know of any educated people that practiced traditional ways and sustained both the education and the traditional way. We lost, I don't know if any of you have heard of Kevin Locke. He's a flutist and a hoop dancer, and he left us a few days ago. But he was younger than me, so he's one of the few. We've had many culture keepers that we've lost during this time of COVID. It's been a devastating for us Indian community. Just those of you that are into health disparity, our average age here in Montana for our American Indian people has upped more than 7 years in the past 18 months. That's how severely COVID has hit our communities. And so many of them have been our culture keepers and our wisdom keepers. Becky and I have had the privilege of continuing with the traditional life, even as we also got all education in the dominant society. But this kind of conference was not possible when I began this journey. When we began our journey, it was not possible. We had to translate everything and interpret everything into our world from a world that was forced upon us. Is that okay? It is. It is, and we take that as part of a destiny. As folks were talking too, I didn't bring my fan, but I'll have this afternoon. Eagle fan. The connection, an eagle cannot fly unless each hair adheres to the hair next to it on the flight feathers. The downy feathers will provide warmth, but they will not provide flight. And it's said among our community that we will not rise above those down unless we each accept each other in order to rise above those obstacles that would destroy us, and in order to use our remarkable sight to aspire to those things which would sustain life. And when I say us, I'm using that broadly. Inclusion and equity and diversity are truly difficult. We must head into the gray. We must communicate about those things that hurt us, those things that frighten, those things that injure us. And so I'm so thankful for this program and to be invited to present, share. Becky and I, as she said, have spent our life making a difference in our communities here on the Northern Plains. And so this is a medicine that many tobacco is a spiritual medicine for us. Our most important medicines, Pajuta Wakam, are not necessarily the spiritual before we move to the mental or the physical. And so those dimensions that she spoke of are very, very similar in our culture. Let's go on, kakeahiku, wana iwelo, wana iwelo, welo, Mataku, yes. Obviously, it's probably not a language that most of you speak, but the language is that of the eagle that's coming and descending and coming home. So it's not just going anywhere; it's coming home. And this we did just 2 push-ups. In ceremony. We would sing 4 push-ups, but the second push-up, the second stanza, we said, "I am here now. The eagle is now arrived." And so while we're people of the buffalo, as far as our journey on this earth, spiritually, we're people of the eagle. And we're designed, it's a beautiful, and one of my aunties had me sing that song, only sing it all 4 stanzas the ceremonial way again and again, prior to her leaving us. And the doctors were wanting to give her morphine. She had cancer, and she was a very loved elder in our community, and married to our tribal chief, our not just our tribal chief, but the bands across the border in Canada. He was the chief of all the bands. And she had me sing that song again and again. And she wanted to stay free of the morphine so she could greet her kids and grandchildren and say goodbye to them and bless them before she left. And the physicians kept wanting to morphine for her pain and discomfort, and she wanted to keep a clear head and a clear spirit. But her last words to me, the last time she had me sing that for her, was, "Dan, I'm flying higher than I've ever flown before." And what she meant by that is that in a storm, the eagles will take to the air. And however high the storm is, they're just above. And so that's spiritually is something that we aspire to, is our spirit storm, even as our eyes witness the storm, so that we can be effective in finding solutions and a way through the storm. I'm going to say a couple more words, because when Columbus sailed into the harbor, he couldn't have reached a culture more different than the one he came from, or even the one he aspired to. Had he indeed reached India or Asia, he would have had a culture more similar to the European culture than he did here in the North and South and Central America. Our culture is one of wholeness. It's one of continuation. As our sister spoke of ancestors, we also include another facet in that, and that's those that aren't born, the descendants. In our Hochokawakan, in our circle of life, our sacred circle, we always include those who aren't here, 7 generations to come, as well as those who've been here 7 generations to the past, as well as those who are here in the here and now. And for us, all of those dimensions come into this moment. What our Christian relatives call the Holy Spirit, Dahuakaskaskan, we already had a fairly sophisticated concept in a word for that. We call it the gravity of our spirit. The gravity of our spirit is that which connects us to all of creation, all that has been, will be, is, all that could have been. That is Dahuakaskaskan, that which connects us. Then how intriguing, we don't find that outside ourselves, we find it inside ourselves. people call it a rite of passage. Anthropologists have called it a rite of passage. It's been interesting reading because we don't really write our own story that much. Increasingly, we have voices within the Native community, and those voices are heavily colonized, though some include with clarity our traditional ancestral where we come from. But I bring that up because my kids talk about tradition as if it's something old and ancient, like we are. And
Seriously?
and I tell them, no. Tradition is alive and vibrant like you are. Tradition is something we've practiced for a long, long time, but it is what has withstood the tests of time and the tests of trauma, tests of challenge, and the tests of adversity. And I do believe that Becky and I appreciate and value tradition more than we ever have, and recognize wisdom in sustaining our grief when we offer to prayer for those that have left us. We have been profoundly impacted, us in the American Indian community, by COVID, and us within our family. Last July, we quit counting at 62 the numbers of persons within our immediate family, first cousins, not second or third, first cousins, moms, dads, uncles, brothers, sisters, children, grandchildren that had died specifically from COVID-related issues. Now, some of them were suicides, some were deaths of motor vehicle accidents and so forth, secondary to substance use, but they were directly related to the grief and difficulty in our community from COVID, and many of our elders was from COVID itself. I'm going to be quiet and let my wife share a bit.
Well, I think one of the most important things that we can address is how important our culture and our spirituality is for who we are. And that sounds so easy, but there are so many of our young people that aren't aware of who they are. They look in the mirror and they know that they're different because they're a person of color, and they get the treatment from society as a person of color, which isn't always positive. But one thing that we need to teach them and be responsible for teaching our young people is to connect to that, because their culture and traditions, that's theirs, that's uniquely theirs. And in those spiritual practices, in those spiritual beliefs, and those traditions comes a strength that they can draw on, that sustains them through difficult times. And we forget that. We assume that they are aware of those things because they may be around them, but they're not. And that's a strength that they can tap into that is theirs, and it makes it possible for them to survive and grow with whatever life has to have them face. And I think that's one thing, like that Dan said, through our last few months, we've had to teach our children and reinforce for our children about spiritual tradition and what they can go to when they're feeling their most vulnerable. And when you have young people who aren't able to connect to that, they truly feel lost. And so I think that's a strength and a responsibility that all of us have in our communities to encourage young people to tap into their belief system. And if they don't have someone available to them right in their home, to connect to somebody in their community and their family so that they can learn these ways that are ours. And we've had so many years that was went underground because it was taken from us as Native people. And we're all aware of now the movement on the boarding school experience, which the majority of the population in the United States weren't even aware of how our children were taken. And that caused a great deal of sadness, disruption, and trauma within our homes and in our communities. Because when our children are taken and they're not allowed to access and use their language and learn their traditions and cultures, they are lost. And so now we're finding that we have to have our children reconnect with that. That's incredibly important, because then when they look in the mirror, they see someone who is proud to be who they are, no matter what their skin color is, that those that have gone before have sacrificed so much for us to be here, and that we need to continue growing and not just surviving, growing. And within that, then those that come behind us that are yet to come will come into a home that is rich in culture and traditions. And we have we're the parents of 14 kids. So our twins will walk through the house singing, and it makes our heart strong, because whenever we need to find strength, they can go to those songs, they can go to those prayers. And we were at a heavenly birthday party for my grandson, who we lost about 3 months ago, and Dan wasn't able to be there. So I looked at my older son and I said, "Can you start the songs?" And he said yes, because our males always start the songs. And he said yes, and he started them. And I was so proud, and I was so happy. I was kind of shocked, but I was so proud that he could just automatically start and sing those songs. So I know that after Dan and I are not here, that those songs, those traditions, those ways, our ways will continue. And I think that's incredibly important.
We encourage you to enter questions or enter comments in the chat box. We'll read those as we move along. But till the hour. But when we're talking about holistic, everything, think in terms of circles and circles. We talk about directions, yes. And our sister talked about 4, and we usually include 7. We'll include the directions that our brother acknowledged, the north, south, east, and west, and the directions that our sister acknowledged, above, below, the earth, the heavens, and within. And the one that I think is most difficult for so many of our relatives in this time is the one within. And so anthropologists reduced our spirituality to animism, whatever that is. They said that we animated everything. We made the earth animated, the air animated. Those of us that were involved in Standing Rock just a few years ago, we were terrorists, water protectors, terrorists. Kidding me? How could we be terrorists? Who speaks for the water if us human beings don't? Who speaks for the air if we human beings don't? Who speaks for the earth if we human beings don't? Terrorists? And we were terrorized repeatedly while we were at that camp, through the very cold winter, through the very rainy spring and fall. We were terrorized by legalized folks. And sometimes they would cry as they brought tear gas to us, as they shot us with their rubber bullets, as they kept noise going 24/7 to harass us, as they had drones going over our camp, and we were the terrorists on our land, trying to protect our water in our time for those generations yet to come. What an intriguing world we live in. And we won't get further into that, but the anthropologist said that our coming of age ceremony, which is what we call the Hamblechiapi, and the Hamblechiapi, that literally translates to crying for a dream. Not joyful, not excited, but crying for a dream. And we go on a hill for 4 days and nights with no food or water. just ourselves. We sit in a circumscribed area and we tie up what we call prayer ties. And each tie that we prepare, and those will represent 7 different colors, and they will represent 101 of each color. And we put that, we use what we call a cherry wood stick the corners, and we wrap what would look like a little fence around us with these 7 different colors. And we sit there. We sit within there for 4 days and nights, sometimes longer. And we won't get into those details because those have to do with some of our practices. But it wasn't a coming of age ceremony. It was a ceremony of encountering, for those, again, I'm going to use Christian analogies because most of us are familiar with them, but I would say Christ within, God within. When Moses asked who should he say had talked to him, and Yahweh said, I am. I like that. And not little I, big I. It's our belief that all of us come connected to creation. All of us are evidence that we're part of creation. Our life is evidence of that. When you monetize everything and objectify everything, you lose the value. We, in my opinion, and you might know the price, you might know the worth, but you don't know the value. One of the things that I loved in some of the American quote founders, all men, all white men, all landholders, all over age 21. So that excluded, well, about 75% of the population at that time. We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal. How delightful that in the 1900s, they finally recognized that women also could participate in this concept of equality. How delightful that in 1964, and again in our President Obama, that we could start trying to reduce the gerrymandering and the Jim Crow laws and include all of us to reduce the obstacles. But we still fight with those things in very, very real ways, not just in Georgia. We certainly do address those things right here in Montana. But in the Hamblechiapi, we go find answers to those things which oppress us. And what a crazy thing. The first time I went many years and I never had a dream. And I thought, oh man, even have the idea of quantification. You know, for example, is Malcolm X less black than Martin Luther King? Because in the American Indian community, we literally are gone to blood quantification. You're not Indian unless you're enrolled. You're not enrollable unless you're a certain quantity of this. So we have people claiming to be Indian that know none of our lived experience, but they have some kind of record, the way we would with animals and such, a pedigree of. But is that what makes an Indian? Is that what makes a Black American? Is that what makes an Asian American? Is that what makes a white American? If I say I'm Irish or say I'm Swedish, I don't know that people would argue with me. But it's kind of a joke in our community, not a joke, because but everybody that we meet has Indian blood in them, and they're probably telling the truth, but they don't have the lived experience of the culture. They have not got. And the reason they weren't, that song we just sang was not even legal until 1978. We had to go underground. With a lot of times it was on at church. On Sundays, when they go to have the potluck after the services, is when the ceremonies would break out. The ceremonies would have continuity, when the Indians would be able to be Indian among each other, right there under the eye of the oppressor. So in Hamblechiapi, we go inside. Buffy St. Marie many years ago said, people say I see Indian, I see visions because I'm Indian. I think there's visions to be seen. something we found that belief is a huge filter to experience. And we found that those that are quote colonized, which would be probably everyone on this call, and I'm all for indigenation. I don't know what decolonization means. I'm not sure it means, but I do know what indigenation means, which is including who we are from the past to the present on to the future in ways that are sustainable, so that we'll still be here, and that will require those gray area conversations. So in Hamlet, just there for 4 days and nights with ourselves. No elders, no younger siblings, no older siblings, no parents. The animals that come, I'm still not sure of the concept of wild animals. They still call all this earth around us wilderness. Our relative talked about 10,000 years, but there's evidence of longer habitation by two-leggeds here on this planet, which I would assume were our predecessors. They were humans, that we're sure of. And they were no less intelligent than we are. They were no less sophisticated than we are. They were no less aspirational than we are. And the things that have emerged that we've sustained in our songs and practices, that they brought forth to us to allow us to sustain through the adversity which we have yet to address, is many. And on Hambletiapi, who you encountered was that part of self that connects with creation. How awesome is that? Who would have ever thought, those of you that are listening that have been through some very, very difficult times, who would have ever thought the adult that was going to rescue you someday is you? Who would have ever thought that if your parents were so inadequate? One of the things that I've learned in our years of clinical practice is people are doing their best. I didn't know that. When I was young, my mom told me once, there's nice white people, Dan, they're just quiet like us. Because it seemed like the loud ones would always get away with it. And our kids are still having that here in the Brute Valley, which has been in the country from time memorial. There's very, very few Indians live in this valley now. And our kids are called prairie hens, and our kids are assaulted and fought. Today was picture day. I went to school and we talked to them about having a climate that's inclusive. And I went and parents with their children dressed in American flags from top to bottom with MAGA hats for picture day. And here's our brown kids walking into school with this. And the first girl they encounter is one that punched him in the face at a football game last fall when they got kicked out. I bring these things because all color on this call know what we're talking about throughout their time. It's a lived experience. And so if you have a blood quantum, but you don't have a lived experience, you honestly can't reference culture. And so part of embracing culture is not so much refusing other aspects of culture. But what an awesome thing to sit 4 days and nights and encounter Creator within self.
And I think one of the things that is important is that in our belief system is that we're always taught that we're always connected. We're always connected. We're never alone. And that's some strive to teach our children and to other children. It's just our belief. It was against the law for so long that went underground for so long that was taught, but not in an obvious way. And so now we can teach our children that. But whenever whatever child I'm sitting, I worked with kids and adolescents. That was where I worked with my primary. But I would tell them, if you sit quietly, Dan has an expression, we're spiritual beings on a physical journey, and I truly believe that. Because I said one of the things that we're taught is if you sit quietly, you can feel those that have gone before and those that are yet to come. They're part of you, and that flows through you, and that makes you stronger. You can draw on that. So in times of difficulty, they're struggling with whatever it is that has brought to them, they're never alone. And I think that's a teaching that we need to continue. Somebody asked a question about like two-spirited people. We growing up, that was never an issue within our tribe. That people are accepted for who they are. You know, you are who you are. We have grow up with the idea of there is no I, it's we. Whenever you look at what you choose to do, even in life, you look at it from the perspective of what is my talent, what can I do in order to help the tribe, to help Native people grow. It's a we concept. And so to focus on I is still really a difficult thing for me. Because whatever I do, I always think of we. What is better for us? What is better for us? And I pray for we. I pray for us. I pray for everybody. The wonderful thing about that is as I'm praying for everyone else and using that time of prayer, I know that there are others that are praying for me. So it is a full circle. No one is ever left out. You always have support. You always have a way of accessing thoughts and prayers, things that will help you survive and even in your most difficult time. And I think that one of the things that I tell people, I tell our children, I tell whoever it is that I work with, is you have to go back and you have to know your history. No matter how difficult it is, even for tribal history, you have to know where you come from. You have to know the difficult things that happened. You have to, because that's part of who you are. And then you can move forward. You can move forward because those that have gone before you have had the strength to survive and do what they have. Otherwise, we would hear those songs and prayers that were tried to be taken from us. All of those things that were they tried so hard to obliterate, take from us, they never did. And so we're stronger for that. And so I always keep that in mind. And I try to teach our children that they're unique, they're special, they're blessed. And all of those blessings will help them be strong and help them address whatever it is they need to address in their life, whatever it is. And so that's what we try to work with on an everyday basis. And we do that through song, we do that for prayer. People will say, just pray. Do you know how difficult it is to pray for 4 days and for 4 nights? And when we go into ceremony without food and water for 4 days and 4 nights and we're dancing, I had a difficult time, and I did that for years and years and years, but I was done praying within like the first 5-10 minutes, because I prayed for everybody I knew, and I prayed for the birds, and I prayed for the bugs, and I prayed for I was done. And so for 4 days, I had to go back and recenter and sit quietly and learn to do that and learn to focus and learn to pray. And through this becoming and realizing how strong I am, how resilient I am, and how I just don't survive, I can continue to grow. And that's the gift that I would like to pass on to everyone, is that to go inside and to think. If you need if you're struggling with that, think of somebody who is really suffering, who can't just get up and walk away and go get a drink of water or eat in order to feel better. Because those are the people that truly are strong and are truly blessing us as they make their difficult journey. And each one of us have the capacity to do that. And we're just fortunate enough to be able to have our culture and our traditions and our songs and our ceremonies to help us recenter ourselves and to maintain our strength in difficult times. Yes.
what Becky just now said, when we finished the song, we said, oh, Mataku Yasin. Mataku Yasin literally means things connected, everything that has been, everything that will be. So in the dominant society, often in prayers and stuff, we'll hear amen. So that you'll hear us say Mataku when we're done speaking, we're done with the board, but we're reminded everything is connected. When I work with people, I was a lousy behaviorist, but I worked with beliefs, because from beliefs, thoughts, words, and actions come. And it says I was taught to work with actions and thoughts and words, and beliefs were left out of it as if we're neutral, as if we're a blank state, as if anybody was. We've had some questions about the LGBTQ, and so thank you, because now to be inclusive, it's important. And so I introduced myself in Lakota, but I didn't say him, hers. In Lakota, we have 7 variations of gender. And so there's male, there's female, there's male and female within one, which we would call bisexual in the dominant society. There's primarily female within the male, which we would call winkte, which we'd call gay in the dominant society. There's females that are bisexual that have interest in both, two-spirit. Then females that are primarily male in their gender identity. It's so that to us was part of the understanding of who we are. We say it's awesome to be it's awesome to be genuinely yourself. But what's the compass for finding who self is? What's the compass for finding not just who self is, but who self is connected to creation and to destiny, to become the one that you came to be? And people will, our daughter used to say, I'm lost, Daddy, I'm lost. And I'd say, no, you're right here. She'd say, I'm lost. I knew what she meant. She was young, and all the parts of herself were clamoring for expression. All those parts of herself were clamoring for identity. But it's so important that she find what we might say spirit self. That she find within, again, what our Christian relatives call Christ within. I love Paul's teaching about God in us. I love that teaching, even though I might come to it from a different point. I might have you come and discover the creator coming through within yourself. It can never be harmed, can never be damaged. What an awesome concept. And so our different gender roles also were always spiritual first. So Winkte, so the different, the two-spirited, all the people, we didn't separate it to this is sexuality and this is spirituality. It's all connected. Something I found in our culture is sometimes people with great charisma have very poor character, and yet we will let them be leaders. And people with wonderful character have very little charisma. And now we call them, they're on the spectrum. A lot of scientists and medical professionals I notice are, quote, on the spectrum. They're wonderful with academic things, and they suck with social and relational things. On the spectrum in the community, you'll find all the attributes and strengths. But in an individual, to ask for an individual to be everything, to be all things to all people, how ridiculous. How wonderful it is. Be who you are. And we tell them, be yourself. Everybody else is taken. Don't try to be somebody else. Be who you are. Be who you came here to be. Be the one that you came into this earth to be. Be the one of your destiny. Seek that from Tunkashla Kantaka. Seek that from creation. Seek that within. Not an easy thing, as Becky said, just sitting. Now, those ceremonies that she was talking about was the Wiwang, it was the Sundance. Again, that was illegal until 1978. It had to be hidden. It had to be done secretly. It had to be hidden even within families, the Christians versus the traditionalists. would cheer on each other. Some of you know the stories, or maybe you don't, but after when Lincoln was president, they hung 38 plus 2 American Indians. They were going to hang 112. So he reduced the number to 38. So Lincoln, for all of his positive and negative, he has both in our community. He fought us too in Illinois as they were busy establishing the New Jerusalem on land that had already been occupied. Earlier, I said they called our wilderness, and for us, the wilderness didn't come until outside folks came and started trying to take everything over. The animals weren't wild, they were animals. The birds weren't wild, they were birds. The humans weren't wild, they were humans. The various nations, the diversity we had on this continent probably matched the diversity that was in Europe at the time. And actually we got along better, but we can argue about that, discussions about that. We certainly weren't politically correct. You know, as a child, the boarding school era lasted for up to 5 generations for some of our families. Boarding school, you were forced to go away, and folks were sexualized. They were emotionally abused, sexually abused, not always just by outside people, not just by the white people and the churches. So when people talk about the boarding school legacy, they say this is part of our Indian history. Again, I don't mean to offend our Christian relatives, but I say, no, that's part of Christian history. This is what Christianity did to people that weren't Christian. This is what they were allowed to do to children. The fellow, when I was a youth, the fellow that was the head of the boarding schools was the man that ran the internment camps for the Japanese during World War II. What kind of qualification is that to be an educational leader? And I'm still offended by it to this day, though I'm very thankful for my second outside. Buried my older brother just 2 Saturdays ago. I said goodbye to my brother, just 18 months older than me. And there was another person from our community that was the first one to have molested me all those years later. And I'm confident that person remembered the same as I do. And so we don't talk about it sometimes because we don't cast shame around us. But all of our issues with sexuality within our communities, my Black relatives that were in families that wouldn't allow them to be different expressions of gender, different expressions of sexual identity, and so forth, were literally ostracized and kicked out of their families because of Christianity. Can Christianity be loving? Can Christianity have agape love? And so I could agree with everything I'm saying today that are my relatives, my brothers and sisters. And we can love and live with the differences that we move to and learn. And so I apologize for not introducing myself as he and him and his, because I want an inclusive, accepting society that still contains diversity, that still contains all of the expressions of life as we bring them. But we've yacked a long time, and we're going to have more time this afternoon. Thank you so much for allowing us to be on this program, and thank you so much for allowing us to share some of our songs and some of our history. Blessings, and we look forward to hearing the other speakers. Doksha. Akewa, Wakian Kinte, and Mataku Ya Oyesu.